Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome wherever you are in the world to the IMPA Virtual Events Week once more. As many of you will know, a driving agenda for the organisation this year has been sustainability and looking closely at sustainability within the supply chain. And so for this session, I'm delighted to introduce Morten Fristrup from the Marine Stewardship Council that's going to tell you a little bit about the agenda that the MSC has and the work that they're doing and what the MSC stamp and standard looks like. And I think this is highly appropriate for all of us in procurement and supply chain as we try to look a little bit closer at exactly how and what we buy as we look closer at the environmental agenda. Morten, delighted to have you with us today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I'll hand over.
Thanks for having me.
Hand over to you.
All right, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen. So the Marine Stewardship Council, we're not the only ones with the name MSC. I'm aware, moving into this forum from the shipping industry, that there are some shipping companies who share the name with us. So I'll try to sort of keep saying Marine Stewardship Council, even though we tend to speak about ourselves as the MSC. But what is Marine Stewardship Council? We are an eco-label, and we are an international non-profit organization with a mission to end overfishing and restore fish stocks for future generations. Our vision is of the world's oceans to be teeming with life and seafood supplies safeguarded for this and future generations. And our mission is to use our blue eco-label and fisheries certification program to contribute to the health of the world's oceans by recognizing and rewarding sustainable fishing practices, influencing the choices people make when they buy seafood, and working with our partners to transform the seafood market to a sustainable basis. A little bit about our history. We were formed by WWF and Unilever in 1999, or 1997 actually. And that came as a result of the collapse of the cod stocks off the shores of Newfoundland in Canada in 1992, which happened after severe overfishing and mismanagement of the fishery. And it was quite a shock. The cod stocks fell to 1% of earlier levels, and when the fishing closed in Newfoundland, around 40,000 people lost their jobs, and whole communities were devastated. So this was definitely a wake-up call that the ocean wasn't up for grabs. The fish stocks were not going to recover unlimited overfishing. So WWF and Unilever, they got together and formed MSC, and MSC has been independent from these two organizations since 1999, and we are an international non-profit organization. So today we have offices around the world, around 200 staff, actually a little bit more today. This slide is perhaps a little outdated already, but we are around the world, but we are, I would say, strongest in Western Europe, North America, Southeast Asia, and Australia and New Zealand, but we are a worldwide organization. So what is it that the MSC do? So the MSC program, if you look at the graph on top, sort of shows the journey of seafood from the sea to the plate of the consumer. And we are the three pillars in the middle. So we have a fisheries certification program. Fisheries can get certified to sell their seafood as MSC certified sustainable. We have a chain of custody certification that ensures traceability along the supply chain. And we have an eco-label licensing that ensures that the eco-label is used properly on consumer products. And MSC is consistent with the FAO's guidelines for the eco-labeling of wild-caught seafood. So it has to be a voluntary program that is non-discriminatory. It has to be based on scientific evidence. There has to be transparency in the process. And it has to be a third-party certification. And there has to be certification of the supply chain. And MSC is the only certification and eco-label program that lives up to the best practice set by both the FAO, which is the UN Food and Agricultural Organization, and ISEAL, which is the Global Membership Organization for Credible Sustainable Standards. And MSC is also the only international certification program to be recognized by the Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative. So what's the problem? Well, overfishing is a global challenge. So since 1990 to 2018, there's been a 122% rise in total food fish consumption. There's been a 14% rise in global capture fisheries production, and a staggering 527% rise in global aquaculture production. Now, bear in mind, MSC only certifies wild-caught seafood, not aquaculture, but it is the market is sort of intertwined. And over a third of fish stocks are estimated to be fished beyond the biological sustainable levels. And almost 80% of landings are estimated to be from sustainable stocks. So here's, you can see a chart of the number of overfished fish stocks, maximum sustainably fished and underfished. And you can see the top part, the orange one, is the one that's considered unsustainable, and that's the third of all fish stocks. And as you can see, that portion has grown, and there's a downward trend with the fewer fish stocks being sustainable and more fish stocks being unsustainable. And this is the trend that we want to reverse. Now, mind you, these graphs are often misrepresented. Maximum sustainably fished is often represented as fish to the limit, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That's the optimal sustainably fished stocks. So they are fished to the sustainable limits. But of course, there's only a fine line before it can become unsustainable. And if you look at these numbers divided by the world's oceans, you can see there's quite a varied picture. The Central Pacific, Southwest Pacific, Northeast Pacific, and Northeast Atlantic, they're doing quite okay. Around 80% of fish stocks there are sustainable. However, Southwest Atlantic, Southeast Pacific, and Mediterranean and Black Sea fish stocks are not doing very well. Around 40% are sustainable. So, the global challenge of unsustainable fishing. So the oceans are in a crisis, and overfishing is at the heart of the problem. A third of the world fisheries have now been exploited beyond sustainable limit, which was only a tenth in the 70s. The UN estimates that losses could reach tens of billions of dollars each year if these trends are not reversed. And improvements that are taking place in many industrialized nations, they're not being matched in the global south, where stocks continue to decline at an alarming rate. But there's also hope. In the US, the number of overexploited stocks is at a record low. Overfishing in the Northeast Atlantic has dropped to 40%. There's been similar improvements in New Zealand and Australia and much of Northern Europe. And we can't forget the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which has also helped put a lot of these issues on the agenda. And the MSC is part of a solution. We try to build consensus around what sustainable fishing looks like. We do that by providing a blueprint for fishing that is environmentally and economically sustainable, based on United Nations FAO guidelines. driving change on the water. So we're encouraging and rewarding fisheries to make improvements to meet and maintain MSC certification. We're building demand in the marketplace and in society. With our blue eco-label, we let consumers choose seafood that can be traced back to a sustainable fishery, creating market incentives for more fisheries to meet the MSC standard. And we're also contributing to the UN Development Goals, especially number 14, but also a couple of the others. I won't go into much detail on that. So what is sustainable fishing? What do we mean when we talk about sustainable fishing? And what is the MSC fishery standard? Sorry, I'm having some, yes, now there's a video. So, a brief overview of the MSC fishery standard. There has to be a fishery assessment. And the fishery standard is used to assess if a fishery is well managed and sustainable. The MSC fishery standard reflects the most up-to-date understanding of internationally accepted fisheries science and management. It's audited by third parties. So the standard assesses a fishery against a number of criteria. And these assessments, they are done by independent third-party auditors. In our sort of world, they're known as certification assessment bodies, or CAPs. And it's not done by the MSC. So MSC makes the rules, but we don't enforce them. And this ensures that we remain impartial and neutral from the assessment process. When a fishery is assessed and successfully certified to the fishery standard, its certified catch can be sold with the blue MSC eco-label. And this certification is voluntary. It's open to all fisheries that catch marine or freshwater organisms in the wild, which includes most types of seafood and fish and shellfish. So the MSC doesn't have any influence on which fisheries who are applying to be certified, and we don't have an influence on the outcome. The MSC fishery standard has 3 core principles that every fishery must meet. Oh, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. So principle 1 is the sustainability of the fish stock. So fishing must be at a level that ensures it can continue indefinitely and the fish population can remain productive and healthy. So this is the core issue of talking about sustainable fishing and overfished fish stocks, is that the stock must be healthy and the level that it is fished on must not exceed certain limits. Principle 2 is about minimizing the environmental impact. So fishing activity must be managed carefully so that other species and habitats within the ecosystem remain healthy. And this includes bycatch of non-target species. This includes, it could be, turtles, sharks, but it could also be other commercial species. And it also includes the impact on the bottom habitat and general environmental impact. And thirdly, there must be effective management in the fishery. So the fishery must comply with relevant laws and also be able to adapt to changing environmental circumstances. All of this is more fleshed out in this assessment tree. So all the 3 principles, they have several performance indicators that the fishery are assessed against. And this is just to give you an overview. I won't go into detail with this, but there's a lot more to it than just the 3 principles. They all have different performance indicators. So this fishery certification process is a lengthy process, and it's a quite heavy scientific process done by third-party auditors, with scientific expertise. So how much fish is MSC certified? Around 15% of the global marine catch is MSC certified, which is almost 12 million tons. And there are over 350 certified fisheries and over 130 fisheries in assessment. And these, mind you, these numbers are from last year, so they might have changed. And I'd also just add that a fishery can be anything from a single boat, which is quite uncommon, to very large organizations. So I think the biggest fishery in the program is, one of the biggest fisheries is the joint demersal fishery in the North Sea, which is basically 4 different countries and their respective fleets who are fishing for demersal species in the North Sea. So a fishery can be anything from 1 vessel to hundreds of vessels. It's more a unit of assessment in our program. So it's maybe not talking about individual fisheries can be a bit misleading, but you can see that the catch has risen. The certified catch has risen in the past 20 years, and it's now 15% of the global marine catch, and there are certified fisheries in over 40 countries. And this is just the current annual report that came out a couple of weeks ago. So, as I said earlier, 1 in 3 fisheries is exploited beyond biologically sustainable levels. And production from marine fisheries has increased to almost 85 million tons. And 17% of all marine catch is engaged with MSC. So 15% is certified, and the rest are either trying to become certified or suspended. And on a commercial side, there are almost 19,000 MSC labeled product on shelves, which represent $10 billion in sales value. You can find MSC products on the shelves in over 70 countries, and there are chain of custody certified companies in over 100 countries. And species-wise, it's quite a varied number of species that are MSC certified. It's everything from mussels to squid, cuttlefish, octopus, various demersal fish, so that could be cod, plaice. Demersal fish are the ones who are swimming near the bottom. Shrimp, prawns, salmon, trouts, and quite a significant amount of tuna, even more significant amount of herring, sardines, and anchovies, and especially white fish such as cod, hake, haddock, pollock. And globally, the MSC certified catch is fairly concentrated in the North Atlantic and the Northeast Pacific, around the sort of, but we also have quite a few tuna fisheries in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and some fisheries in the near Antarctica. So it's a pretty good spread across the world. So how can the market contribute to sustainable fisheries? The MSC approach to sustainability is what we call our theory of change. So we want retailers, brands, restaurants to choose MSC certified sustainable seafood. They have to do that through a traceable supply chain to let consumers know that only seafood from an MSC certified fishery is sold with the eco-label on. And that's where the MSC chain of custody standard and the certification to that comes in. Consumers should preferentially purchase MSC certified seafood with the blue eco-label, and that entails an MSC license. This will increase market demand for certified seafood. More fisheries will choose to improve their practices and volunteer to be assessed to the MSC standard. And fisheries meeting the standard are certified as sustainable. So this is our theory of change. We want this to be sort of a self-perpetuating circle, where more demand drives more fisheries, which drives more consumers to purchase the seafood, which drives more awareness. And a little bit about the chain of custody certification. That every company that wishes to sell MSC certified seafood or sell seafood as MSC certified, they must have MSC chain of custody certification. There are 3 principles to the chain of custody standard. It has to come from a certified supplier. It has to be identifiable. It has to be separated from non-certified seafood. Seafood has to be traceable and recorded. And there has to be a good management that addresses the requirements of the standard. And companies that wish to use the MSC Ecolabel on products or menus must have an MSC Ecolabel license agreement. And in order to get an MSC Ecolabel license agreement, you need to have chain of custody certification. So, as I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of MSC certified products available around the world. There are over 5,000 certificate holders, so that's all the way through the supply chain, that from ocean to plate, where you have chain of custody holders. So these are also potential suppliers, and we've seen a steady growth in the past 10 years. And this is just to give a quick overview of the species and products available. This is what is on shelf currently, so mostly on supermarket shelves. It's not necessarily what's available in the supply chain, but this is what's being sold with the MSC label on. So as you can see, a lot of pollock, which is usually frozen, a lot of mixed products, could be fish cakes with more than one species, herring products, cod, salmon, tuna, mackerel, shrimp, mussels, haddocks, and hake, and all in a variety of product types. And these are the number of products available in different countries. And if you look at the chart, you see, of course, you can see it's been growing steadily for the past 10 years. But you'll also notice that it's the United States and Northern Europe that are our major markets for MSC certified products on supermarket shelves. Also in restaurants, but mainly on supermarket shelves. So what does it cost? Well, fishery and chain of custody certification, there are, of course, costs to the third-party certification body, and there are yearly audits. So this is essentially a deal between the company that wishes to become certified and the certification body. And it has MSC doesn't have any influence and doesn't see any money from that. And then there's the use of the Ecolabel on consumer-facing products. To use the Ecolabel, you have to pay 1.5% royalty to the MSC. That's either on the product value of retail products or on the seafood purchased for food service items. Now, bear in mind, this Ecolabel license agreement is only a requirement if a company wishes to use the Ecolabel on products on their menu or on their menus. And chain of custody certification is only a requirement if you wish to sell a product as MSC certified. So if you wish to put MSC certification in the procurement, in your procurement codes or in your CSR strategies, you can do that. There's no cost to the MSC unless you want to sell the product as certified. And another question we often get asked is, are MSC labeled products more expensive? Well, the MSC works by giving market incentives to fisheries to become certified, but we don't guarantee any price premiums. So the market determines the price difference between MSC and non-MSC certified products, which should be basic supply and demand, but of course in reality it's a lot more complicated than that. We have anecdotal evidence of higher prices for MSC certified fish at the auction level, but it's not something that we have any raw data on a broader scale other than anecdotal evidence. But of course, there must be an incentive for fishermen to become certified. And what we often see is that market access is important. And of course, market access can also lead to different prices. If you have access to the right markets with the right prices, or if you only have access to secondary markets, there could be price differences. But we see on some products or some species that have significant higher prices for MSC certification, such as tuna. But we've also seen a drop in tuna prices as more a drop in MSC certified tuna prices, that is. Once more certified fisheries has entered the program. So there's simply been a higher supply of MSC certified tuna, which has led to lower prices. On other products, we have very, very little price differences. In the market I'm familiar with in Northern Europe, products like prawn and herring are almost universally MSC certified. Most of the catch is MSC certified, and thus there's little difference between certified and non-certified products because almost all of the products are certified. But that still means that the market access is important. And we've seen that a lot of the German retailers, for example, have MSC certification as a requirement to get into their markets. So that's been a definite driver of MSC certification along the whole supply chain. So why should you choose MSC certification? Well, MSC certified seafood make it easy for purchasing managers to ensure sustainability. Just like it makes it easier for the consumer to choose sustainability. They only have to look for one eco-label. You don't necessarily have to know the ins and outs of the global fishing industry and what sustainability really means when we talk about fishing. So to put it in sort of layman's terms, we've done the groundwork. All you have to do is choose the eco-label. And the MSC is a credible tool to show your sustainability credentials. And this is something I've been hearing from our market sort of off the record, that it's also seen as an insurance policy against bad publicity. So you might not talk about it that much. You might not promote MSC certification that much because, let's face it, most consumers, they have a lot of on their minds, and fish might not be on the top. But with MSC certification, you are insured against most bad publicity because we set a high standard for sustainability, and as long as you have that, you're in a good place. But more importantly, why should you choose MSC certified seafood? Well, the maritime supply chain can be a market driver for change, just like we've seen retail markets being a market driver for change. And that's back to our theory of change. We need someone to start the demand. We need someone to get the ball rolling. And by demanding certified sustainable seafood, you can drive change. There's already a lot of chain of custody certified companies. There's already a supply chain in place, and there's mechanisms for ensuring that the seafood you buy is sustainable and traceable. So all you have to do in your position in the supply chain is to make the demand for sustainable seafood, and then that demand can trickle down to the fisheries, hopefully incentivizing more companies to become chain of custody certified and incentivizing more fisheries to make the sustainable changes necessary to ensure sustainable fishery and seafood for future generations. That's it for me. If you have any questions, let me know.
Morten, thank you very much for that. I thought that was a really good introduction to the challenges that you've faced as an organization and how you've dealt with them. I think certainly from IMPA's perspective, we want to be one of those market drivers for change. I'm wondering if you are a ship supplier and you want to be recognised as supplying MSC accredited fish. How would you go about that? Is it possible?
So can I get a grant? If you are a ship supplier, so you're supplying companies in the shipping industry who are then supplying seafood for their customers. In this case, the customers would be the sailors.
They're correct.
Yeah. Well, if there's a demand from your customers for certified seafood, you would need chain of custody certification. So basically, you can go onto our website, find one of our local offices, and my colleagues around the world will guide you. But the basic gist of it is that you need to hire a certification body, the ones we call CAPs. There are a number of accredited certification bodies, and you need to hire one of them to assess your business for a certification.
Okay, is that an expensive thing to set about? I mean, if a ship supplier is, if you like, acting as the intermediary between, let's say, a responsible fishery and the ship owner that has his crew, wouldn't it be possible for the supplier to gain the accreditation for choosing that fishery?
Well, if I'll talk about the cost first, because we're running a third-party certification, so I can't actually tell you how much it costs, because that's not something we deal with. It's the companies that wish to become certified and the certification bodies. So it's between these parties. I can't actually recommend anyone. I'm not allowed to recommend anyone because we have to be independent from that process. But of course there are costs involved, but like any other certification, you have to hire someone to do the certification for you. And of course, we also have now. I think the second question was, so how do you get the certified seafood from a certified fishery, a certified supplier, and where do you get that? Well, we have a long list of certified companies who are certified to sell MSC certified seafood. So of course we can provide guidance, but another issue is that we want this to trickle down. So if your supplier is not certified, well, ask them to get certified. We want the whole supply chain involved, because one thing is we want to ensure that the MSC label is credible and the certification is credible. So we need to have traceability, so we can ensure that when you buy a product with the MSC label on, or a product that says that it's certified, we can actually trace it back to a certified fishery. That's the main reason for the chain of custody certification.
Can I just ask a little bit about the pricing of MSC fish? Because, we've seen with several other things within our industry, if you add a layer of complexity within regulation, then there's a cost attached to that. But doesn't supply, the sort of economic principle of supply and demand come into play here? Because if you're buying MSC labeled product, aren't you buying a product that's sustainable at that time in the year or in that region? I mean, how's the correlation between the sort of sustainable stock in the region sort of judged? Does that play a part, or?
I'm not sure I follow you. So speaking of price difference, of course, you add a layer of complexity, that's true. And I assume that some of the extra costs of getting certified along the supply chain will be reflected in the prices. But it's not something that we have any concrete data on. And the example I gave with tuna is that with tuna, we've seen quite a steep price difference between certified and non-certified tuna. And tuna is a cutthroat business. But with other species, we don't really see a price difference, or not, at least not something where we can compare two different products, because they might not exist if 90% of the market is certified. Well, then you don't have the the comparison. But of course, there will be added costs. I can't deny that.
But wouldn't that be compensated by the fact that if a buyer specifies a certain fish, he might not be aware, or he or she might not be aware that is actually, you know, a higher price in that region or at that time of year, because actually fishing cod in November is not a very sensible thing to do, and it's more expensive based on supply and demand.
Yeah, and it's true, but and also looking at the bigger picture is that, of course, it's supply and demand, and MSC certification adds a certain layer of cost, but I think fish prices vary much more based on the actual supply. So if you have a stock that's overfished, then of course that lowers the supply. So by buying sustainable, you might pay an added price today, but you'll pay a lower price tomorrow by ensuring that the stocks are in good conditions and that there's ample supply of that fish.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, what about, I mean, if we take a cruise line business, I mean, you know, the pandemic has really, you know, taken an axe to that marketplace. But hitherto, I would imagine you've got consumers on board ship that are perhaps dictating, you know, that they are particularly stateside. If you say that there's a big marketplace in the States for the MSC certification. With the cruise liners, I imagine there's industries that are particularly driving. And I think my chairman of IMPA Save is asking this, you know, and I think his sister company or parent company, Stena, for example, insist on MSC fish. I mean, are there particular industries driving that?
Well, I would say, generally speaking, the main industry that's been driving MSC certification has been German retailers and the retail sector in general. But we've also seen, like you mentioned with Stena, we've seen several cruise companies in Scandinavia either demanding from their suppliers or becoming MSC certified and using the eco label in their restaurants, in their cafeterias. My local ferry from Denmark to Sweden, Helsingør, Helsingborg, they've become certified. They're displaying the label. One of the lines, I can't remember which one, one of the lines between Stockholm and Helsinki, they're using the MSC label on their in their restaurants. So we are definitely seeing a demand coming from that sector.
Okay, that's great. So Mark here on the chat sort of makes a point that that it's you know, maybe not everyone within our audience is directly related to this, but I think that, you know, there's two aspects to this, isn't there? This is life below sea, which, you know, anybody in our business should be you know, having an interest in, and I think probably, you know, most do. I think we want to be a part of making this industry sustainable and clean with the work that we're doing. Where do people find out more?
MSC.org.
MSC.org.
Yes.
And do you have any programs people can get involved with at all? I mean, is there any way of getting involved with the work that you do? I mean, are you a volunteer organization, or we are not. Business?
We are a market-driven organization, so we work with the market. So we don't have volunteers, we don't have projects like that. Most of our projects are fisheries related. So that's, you know, increasing fisheries certification in the developing world, stuff like that. But and of course we have projects with our certified partners in the market, but that's mainly it.
So really, I think what we would be looking at here with IMPA and the IMPA Save agenda would be creating our own theory of change that would perhaps see ship owners and operators at the top of that sort of illustration, that circular illustration that you drew, and perhaps they're the ones driving the change, looking for the MSC labeling, supported by, of course, are the suppliers around the world and the catering companies as well. Can't forget them.
Of course.
Let's hope we can perhaps work together on that in the future, Morten.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Great to talk to you. Great to see you again today. And thanks very much for joining us this week. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye.